So let's say there's someone you need taken care of. Someone you need to get rid of. Permanently. What do? Just wait for them to drop? Heart attack? Hope they have a convenient accident? Maybe something more direct. Something subtle. Poison. Or something dramatic. Gunfire. Or you could leave it to a highly trained professional. A hitman. An assassin. Just what sort of dagger does the cloak hide? Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Mind the Gap podcast, bridging the gap between your minds and everything else. I'm Keegan Gwydolyn.
And I'm Mackie Drew.
And our show today is called The Podcast Heard Round the World. And this is our show about assassination. Mackie, do you want to start off with your thing?
Well, let's see, my thing. So I wanted to talk about the history of assassination. First off, sort of like where the word comes from and the group that spawned that term. So the term assassin actually comes from sort of an insult that was thrown at a certain group. It was initially kind of like a slur, talking about a certain religious group. It's a spin-off of the Shia Muslims called the Nizari Ismailis. And there's a lot of Arabic words coming up, so just mind my pronunciation. But the term actually comes from the assassin, comes from the term hashisha or hashish, which becomes hashashin when referring to a person. So it becomes quickly assassin, right? You can hear that, right? What's wrong?
Hashishia, which is like hashishin, which is like assassin, which is like
I'm
assassin,
butchering
right?
this, I'm sure, but like they're the phonetic versions. Yeah,
yeah.
Those butchered Arabic words that I spoke there refer to hash, as in like the marijuana weed hash, the crystal or resin that comes from concentrating the cannabis. So that was actually a term thrown around to talk about like the lower class people of the time, and like basically people who used hash. But yeah, so. The reason that assassin became associated with killing and murder and political assassination is because that this religious group were infamous killers. They were a very small clutch. They were often considered a cult at the time, and they were definitely like a force to be reckoned with. You know, they were something that was actually causing a big stir in the region, and that would be near Iran at this point. But yeah, they had a leader, the Hassan Sabah, and he around 1080 CE or AD, depending on what you prefer. And he took a fortress called Alamat. We're not sure how he got this fortress because a lot of the records have been destroyed, but that was sort of the headquarters of the assassin for nearly 200 years. So he started a cult and he trained them to be killers, essentially. So Sabah, he spent like all of his days in Alamat, the fortress, and he basically worked on religious stuff, and he worked on the Assassin's Creed, which yeah, I said it.
What?
It was sometimes most often referred to the Assassin's Order, but it was called the Assassin's Creed at times. Yes. So
that's hilarious.
So basically, he once he took this fortress and he started his cult, he actually never left, or at least that's how it's reported. He died there and he lived his entire life in that fortress, and he built it up to be a great defensive force, but also a training facility for indoctrination. He had sort of a hierarchical system where he had his top men, and then he had the lower ones, like sort of like the basic. The ensign, is it called in Star Trek? They're the ones they send off to die every episode. Yeah, ensign. And they basically they were disposable pawns. So he actually started, once he established his facility, he started sending them out for political reasons. He started sending them out to kill people for political reasons and, military reasons. So he'd kill politicians and generals and stuff like that. And that's where you kind of get the association with assassin, meaning killing of a political figure, generally what it is now. But even though he was giving out these pawns, to die almost immediately, he trained them very, very well. They were usually very young, well educated, extremely well read. They would know all about the culture that they were supposed to infiltrate. They needed to know the language without an accent, things like that. They would be very, very well disguised in their assassination culture, like outfit. So they would absolutely be perfect killing tools for him to use for his political motivations. But the thing is, assassins would. Sorry, they weren't for hire, at least as far as we know, but we don't know very much about Sabah because a lot of the records were destroyed, which I'll talk about in a second. But basically, it was a lot to further his religious cause, was the idea. Yeah, so the thing was, the assassins would not attack ordinary citizens, and that was kind of the main key thing, right? It's a murder if it's not like a famous person or a political figure, right? And it's an assassination when it's for a political cause.
Or some purpose other than just
exactly. And the reason they were actually called the assassins was because they actually did use hash a lot. Marco Polo said during his travels to the Orient that he heard of an old man of the mountain, which was Sabah, the leader, that he would drug his young followers with hash and lead them to paradise, and then claim only that he had the means to allow their return. So basically, he was drugging people and convincing them to become assassins, and that was what I think the term came from, where people would say, they were drugging them with hash, so they became assassins. I can't imagine they get a lot done on that, though. But yeah.
It's one of those things to just get you in the door.
They don't have many records about this is because the fortress was taken by the Mongols in 1256. So it's kind of like everything was destroyed.
What a shame.
Yeah, that's the basic story of where the assassin term came from. And I think
that's very, very interesting. What I would like to talk about now is the namesake for this very podcast. And that is the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. This is obviously one of the most significant assassinations and perhaps events in history. And it was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. It happened on June 28th, 1914, and it's significant because, as I said, it sparked the First World War. See, Franz Ferdinand was, at the time, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and
I didn't even know there was such a throne.
There was honestly. At the time, not anymore.
Okay.
His wife was also killed, and they were killed in Sarajevo, which is the capital of a country which is actually called Bosnia and Herzegovina.
What?
Yeah. Herzegovina. It's like a two thing. I don't know.
And you were making fun of my pronunciations in the Arabic words.
I was just remarking on how much of a stretch they seemed. Anyways. And they were shot by a man named Gavrilo Princip. The goal of the assassination was to cause the southern Slavic provinces of Austria-Hungary to break off and form a sort of independent Serbia or Yugoslavia. So that's where Yugoslavia came from. The assassination led directly to World War I because the death of Ferdinand caused Austria-Hungary to issue an ultimatum against Serbia. And this ultimatum was partially rejected, which caused Austria-Hungary to declare war against Serbia, and that started World War I.
Although I'm not tops on history, you should know that Franz Ferdinand at the time was only 19.
I did not know
so
that.
This This is a teenager starting a war.
Yeah. Well, he didn't mean to,
in a way.
obviously.
In a way, he didn't say let's war, you know? It's just his death led to it.
So I'm going to sort of tell the story, and I think that's a good way to go through. And history is very... lends itself to storytelling. So I'm going to go through that. So first off, there was a secret Serbian military society called the Black Hand. And
it sounds like a movie already.
And there was a man who led a sort of like splinter cell of this Black Hand organization. And his name was Danilo Ilic. And again, I'm sure I'm butchering these pronunciations. A meeting was held by the Black Hand in January 1914. And they were talking about, okay, we need to cause these lower states to break off from Austria-Hungary so that we can form Yugoslavia, right? They wanted this, you know, Slavia for themselves.
Their own place.
Basically. And so they were talking about targets. Who could they kill that would cause this? So they considered a couple of people. They considered Ferdinand, but the original target they decided on was actually the governor of Bosnia, named Oskar Potiorek. So, the original assassin that they picked a whole bunch of them. They picked 6 guys at first, and they were all fairly young men. 6 Bosnian Serbs were recruited. So they sent off the first guy. He was on his way to kill Oskar, the governor of Bosnia. And he was on a train, and then he noticed the police were searching the train. So he thought, they're on to me. And he threw his weapons out the window of the train. So he had a dagger and a bottle of poison, and he tossed them out the window of the train. So then he gets to wherever it was he was going, and he's like, well, I can't assassinate this guy without weapons, so he...
Whoa, let me guess this. He was going to assassinate this one guy, and he accidentally, when he threw it at the train, the bottle of poison landed on Franz Ferdinand?
No, that would be hilarious.
Well.
So, he couldn't kill this Bosnian governor if he didn't have weapons. So he was looking around for weapons, and while he was looking, the Black Hand was like, no, forget it, scrap it. We're not going to kill this guy anymore. We're going to choose a new target. And they chose Ferdinand. So,
poor guy.
They dispatched a new crew of assassins, and they armed him with a bunch of weapons. They gave him, and like weapons and various other supports. So they gave him 6 hand grenades, 4 automatic pistols with ammunition. They gave him money, suicide pills, training, a special map marked with military outposts so that they could avoid those. They gave them knowledge of a secret underground tunnel, which was used to sneak people and weapons into Austria-Hungary. And they gave them like an admissions card to get into the tunnel.
I had no idea it was so well organized.
Yeah. And there's a huge story that I just didn't have time to go into of like them, you know, finding their way into Austria-Hungary. It's a crazy story and you should definitely look it up. But anyways, let's get to the moment of truth. So, on the morning of June 28th, 1914, Franz Ferdinand arrives in Sarajevo with his wife for a military inspection. So he's going to go and he's going to look at the army and all the military stuff, and, you know, they do the marching and all that stuff. So a motorcade comes along and like a bunch of cars. So he and his wife board a Grad and Stift, which is the car company, a convertible for the ride. So they're driving along, and this motorcade passes by 2 of the intended assassins. Both of them just like chicken out, and they don't do anything. They were armed with like bombs and guns and all kinds of stuff. They just like didn't do anything. At 10:10 in the morning, Ferdinand's car approaches the 3rd assassin, and he does not lose his nerve. He tosses his grenade, but it bounces off of the folded back part of the convertible. So it bounces off the cover, out of the car and into the street, and it explodes underneath the next car in the motorcade. So then the
might as well be like a Three Stooges
Oh,
skit.
You have no idea. So then the assassin is like, all right, I've heard the bomb go off. He doesn't really know if it worked or not. He's like, all right, I'm out of here. Takes his cyanide pill, jumps into a nearby river. Problem is the pill was like not the best quality, so it only really caused him to like vomit. And the river was too shallow to drown in. So the crowd goes and drags him out and beats him senseless, and then the police come and arrest him.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So the next 3 assassins, including the guy who eventually kills him, named Gavrilo Princip, all 3 of those guys fail to act because the motorcade just sort of like, takes off as soon as the bomb goes off. They speed away. They go to like the town hall. They go and have some speeches and stuff. Like, people just didn't really give a crap back then, I guess.
Yeah, it was just an assassination. That happens all the time.
Well, I mean, Ferdinand was apparently pretty pissed off about it, but he was like, I survived, so I'm good. So after learning that the attempt had been unsuccessful, our main assassin, Princip, went to a nearby food shop. I guess he was like, well, that's it. Better have lunch, right? So Ferdinand, meanwhile, is at the town hall, and he's like trying to figure out what to do now. So he decides that he's going to abandon his day's plans of doing the military, visit, and instead he's going to visit the people who were wounded in the earlier bombing attempt. So he and his wife get in his car, and they head off towards the hospital. So they're on their way, and the driver accidentally makes a wrong turn. So, crap. Driver starts turning around, throws the car into reverse. The car starts backing up, and then it stalls, because cars back then, they weren't all that great. So the gears, lock up, and the car stalls. Right then, Princip comes out of the shop where he was having lunch.
He just was like, oh, there's Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah, he sees the car with Ferdinand in it, open, like convertible car, stalled right in front of him. He just pulls out his gun, fires 2 shots. The first shot hits Ferdinand in the jugular vein. The second one hits his wife in the abdomen. And then the car speeds off. And the police jump on Princip right away. But it's just like the craziest happenstance that...
And this led to his death then,
yeah.
Right? The Franz Ferdinand got killed and the jugular was not repairable.
Right. And it's really kind of like sad and stuff because he was apparently like, the car speeds off towards the hospital, and he was telling his wife, he's like, stay with me, and everyone, like, because he's the Archduke, he's the heir to the throne, so they're all like fawning over him, and he's like, it's nothing. He's like clutching his neck. He's like, don't worry about me.
Yeah, it's just a flesh wound. I cut my jugular all the time.
And so his wife died she was dead on arrival at the hospital, and he died like 10 minutes later. So it's kind of sad. And of course, that assassination led to the outbreak of World War I, which means that, it also led to the deaths of millions of other people. And of course, the shot that killed Franz Ferdinand is known as the shot heard around the world.
Naming the episode.
Yes. Now, Mackie, you've got some assassination trivia stuff for us, right?
Yes. Okay. So I kept, I was looking for topics to talk about in this episode, and I kept coming across these great facts. I was like, I wish I could talk about that. So I was like, well, let's just make a list. They're not really great, full stories, but there were some great trivia. So, for instance, the longest running Wikipedia hoax, as in something that was made up to put on Wikipedia and just left, was the supposed assassination of Julius Caesar, which was made up as the person Gaius Flavius Antonius. He was basically fabricated, and he was left on the site for 8 years and 1 month. And then somebody was like, who is this? And it was taken away. But yeah, it was Julius Caesar was actually the result of a conspiracy by many Roman senators, and they didn't really. There wasn't any known person, one guy who did it. So it's kind of not really known who the actual assassin was. So that answers that. But another little piece of trivia: the assassin bug kills other small bugs and uses them as armor to wear.
Oh, that's so creepy.
He's like okay. If I could describe the appearance, it would be sort of like a mix between an ant and a wasp without wings, and he just like think of it like a pile of other small ants on top of him, just so like creepy. Turned into little balls of armor. It's really cool looking, but terrible. Yeah, David Bowie, the famous rock star I've recently found out. I'm terrible at pop culture.
Who's apparently famous.
I've heard. But yeah, he was the next on the list of the targets for John Lennon's assassin, which I won't name here because I don't think you should name names of murderers or assassins.
That's interesting. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, the idea is that you don't give a reason for somebody to become famous for killing someone.
All right, gotcha.
Fair enough. But yeah, there's actually an art exhibit about David Bowie at the AGO right now, which is overwhelmingly massive considering I was at the AGO, the Ontario Art Gallery, or the Art Gallery of Ontario, I suppose, and the other day, and all my contemporary art was squandered because of this David Bowie exhibit, so I kind of hold a grudge against him for that. Because the top 2 floors of this place was all David Bowie. How could you even do that?
Seems a waste.
Yeah, indeed. So now I've got to talk about an assassin caterpillar. So the Lonomia obliqua. Could you take a stab at that pronunciation?
Lonomia sounds right, and then obliqua.
Yeah, okay, so I got it. All right, so yeah, that's the assassin caterpillar, and it's native to South America, and it has a very unique effect. If you just touch it, you don't have to touch it for that long. We don't know how long because it's very rare for people to touch it. Within the next 24 hours, you'll likely have very severe systemic internal bleeding, followed by acute renal failure, and intracranial bleeding. And if you don't die, you'll almost certainly be in a coma, or rather a persistent vegetative state.
What?
Yeah, so it's a unique venom.
It's not a very ethical study to see how long you have
exactly. You want to keep people as far away from this as possible. Exactly. So why would you ever make somebody do this? But the idea is the venom works through disseminated intravascular coagulation, which basically means that your blood starts to clot everywhere in your body all at once.
It's funny. I'm in the middle of my blood block in med school, and like DIC is associated with like everything.
Yeah, no, it's horrible. The amount of symptoms there were, the death, the horrible things were not enough to fit in one podcast. It was astoundingly awful. And that's why it's called the assassin caterpillar. There was a guy who once tried to assassinate the president of the United States at the time, who was Andrew Jackson. He came up to him. He wasn't right beside him, but he came up to him and he tried to shoot at him with 2 pistols, one in each hand, and both misfired at the same time. He failed the assassination, and when Andrew Jackson noticed this, he then proceeded to beat him with his cane until the police arrived. But yeah, that's a fun failed assassination, which seemed to be more common than successful assassinations.
Yeah.
But yeah, a pop culture piece of trivia: the game Assassin's Creed, which is the most popular series made by Ubisoft right now, was actually supposed to be a spin-off of Prince of Persia. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of Prince of Persia. I also heard it was a crappy movie.
I haven't seen the movie, again, not very good at pop culture. But it was originally going to be called Prince of Persia: Assassins. And that would have been a huge mistake, because I know I would never have played it had it been Prince of Persia. But it is an amazing series on its own.
Huh.
Yeah.
I've never played it.
Fun trivia.
I've got, to close off the main section of our podcast, what I am going to call Keegan's Guide to Assassination. So I'm going to take you through some cool assassination techniques and methods.
Whoa. Before we start this, we got to say, isn't it, don't try this at home?
Yeah. Disclaimer, I'm not endorsing any assassination you attempt. I'm just telling you cool ways that one would assassinate someone.
You know, if you had to.
Yeah, you know. in the event of some terrible takeover of a tyrant and blah, blah, blah.
Sure. There you go. All right. Anyway, get to it.
Yes. My first category is what I've called old but gold. So we've got our standard stabbing, strangling, bludgeoning, smothering, poisoning. And the key technique, and these were used in ancient times, right? The key technique is to get into the person's house or whatever undetected.
Yes, like Sabah's assassins who were trained in the culture of the area that he was supposed to assassinate in.
Yeah, and even sneaking into the building, getting past the guards, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Some other old but gold techniques are the use of stuff like death cap mushrooms and similar plants, because they can't be perceived by taste, and they have a delayed onset of symptoms. Ooh. So you can poison them and then get really far away, and then they'll die.
I feel like the assassin caterpillar could be used for that too.
Indeed. And then, of course, in ancient Rome, it was a fairly common practice, if you had an enemy, to just pay off a huge mob of people to beat them to death.
That's actually really clever. I like that.
Yeah, it's you're going to prosecute all of us?
Yeah. Although it does open up the idea for everybody to be like, yeah, we didn't do it. That guy told us to,
Yeah, that's true.
He cast a spell on us. All the ancient stuff.
Of course. Then, of course, we've got some modern methods. So, guns really extended the reach of assassins. They could kill people from farther away and maybe get away with it, The first governmental heads to be killed by firearms were the Regent Moray of Scotland in 1570 and William the Silent in 1584.
William the Silent?
Yeah.
What a great name.
Another Scottish dude. Scottish noble.
Maybe I should be called Mackie the Loud.
Mackie the Obnoxious. All right, so apart from that, you also see gunpowder used a lot. So if you're in the Middle East and the Balkans and you have less precision and stuff, you don't have the resources, you just pack a whole bunch of gunpowder into one place and make yourself a car bomb or a grenade or a landmine, because, requires a lot less precision, just a lot of gunpowder. If you want to kill someone who's in an armored car, grab yourself a rocket-propelled grenade or an aircraft-mounted missile and away you go. If your target's in a plane, you can shoot it down with a surface-to-air missile. There was some prominent African politician, and his plane was shot down. His private jet was shot down with surface-to-air missiles in Africa. It's man,
wow,
that seems
Why
elaborate.
Didn't we hear about that?
Huh?
Why didn't we hear about that?
Oh, I'm sure we did at the time.
Okay.
It was a while ago.
We're just forgetful.
Yeah. So commonly portrayed assassination methods, you'll see someone with a sniper rifle. There's a whole bunch of movies where it's all about sniper rifles, right?
I think that's really the only way to go. I mean, if you can be a million miles away and just somebody dies, we're just what could have happened, right?
Well, there are some problems associated with sniper rifles, which is why their use is fairly rare. There's some difficulties, including, long-range shooting. You need to find a hidden position with a line of sight. You have to know in advance where the target's going to be and their travel plans. You need to be able to identify your target at long range, and you have to be able to score a lethal hit pretty much on first shot. You usually don't get a second chance. On top of that, sniper rifles are expensive, and they take a lot of training to use well, right? Whereas a handgun, which is used far more often, is easily concealed, and it's cheap, and it's, compared to a sniper rifle, it's kind of foolproof. You can just sort of get within...
Bam.
Yeah. Get within throwing distance and point it at them.
Yeah, but that takes the whole fun out of it. Assassination started with nuance and cleverness and how to best sneak in and out well, still being able to kill your target. Now this is just bam, and that's it.
I know.
That's almost a betrayal of the nature of assassination. After gaining such an appreciation for assassination after researching this episode, that feels disgusting to me.
Well, it's certainly lazy.
Oh, certainly.
Say you're a governmental body and you want to knock off some
person who's, a pebble in your shoe. You might want to use poison. It's an easy way to have deniability.
A pebble in your shoe?
Body.
How old are you?
Quiet, dude.
Are you turning 60 this year?
Example. Georgy Markov was assassinated, it's said, by the KGB. And this is like the coolest thing I've ever heard. They injected a tiny ricin pellet, and ricin is a poison derived from a type of bean. I can't remember what the bean is called now.
Castor bean.
Castor beans, yeah. That's right. He was assassinated by injecting a tiny ricin pellet into his leg by an assassin using a modified umbrella gun. So the guy had an umbrella, pointed it at his leg, and it just went bonk, and shot this ricin pellet into the guy. That's like the
pretty
coolest
amazing
thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it seems really elaborate, which is great.
Yeah. And then more recently, I think this was about 2006, a man named Alexander Litvinenko was given a lethal dose of polonium-210.
What?
Via aerosolization onto his food.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So we got radiation poisoning and died.
Okay. Now I like that. I like that it's like a delayed reaction. You're going to get radiation poisoning. Like, who would have ever guessed?
And it's kind of
How
like
could they even found that out?
Cool, I don't know. It's like a modern spin on a classic thing,
If I was an assassin and I came up with that, I couldn't help but to turn myself in so that I could just get the credit.
It is cool.
Anyway, is that all you've got now?
That is all I've got. So that's Keegan's guide to assassinating, but don't actually use those methods. Just think about how cool they are.
That sounds really illegal. All right, let's go to the game section. All right, welcome to the game section. So, Keegan, what do you consider the most interesting historical event that you've heard about? Historical catastrophe, rather.
I remember hearing about this. It was Boston in 1919, and there was a industrial alcohol company in the middle of the city. One of their tanks burst, and it flooded the streets with molasses.
Oh, I've totally heard of this. Yeah, that's crazy. Can you imagine? It was like a meter high or something like that.
It was like the slowest tidal wave of all time. And it killed 21 people.
You know what? I gotta go with the Great Stink. Have you heard of the Great Stink?
I've definitely heard of this.
So it was kind of sort of an event in the summer of 1858 in London. And the idea is that it was basically all the buildup of the recently invented toilet flushed through the streets or the sewers of London, which were never dealt to deal with sewage. They were dealt to deal with rainfall, right? So these all got backed up to crazy amounts, and basically it was rotting sewage all summer long, and it was an unbelievable stink that took years to go away.
All right, 5-minute challenge.
Yes, you were challenged last week to learn as much as you can about the Wreck of the Titan in 5 minutes or less. What did you learn?
Right. Wreck of the Titan is a novella from written in 1898, and what's interesting about this is it features an ocean liner called the Titan, which sinks in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg. And this is obviously shockingly similar to the Titanic, the real ship which actually struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sunk 14 years later.
Yes, it was weirdly similar. There were a lot of... Do you have anything more?
I have some uncanny similarities. So it sank in... They both sank in April in the North Atlantic from hitting icebergs. Both had not enough lifeboats for everyone. They were traveling at similar speeds, had similar lengths, similar equipment. They both had triple screw propellers, were described as unsinkable, and over half of the passengers died in both of them. And of course the name Titan and Titanic, right?
Weirdly similar.
Very weird coincidence. Or was it a coincidence?
So is that what you got?
What I got. You got anything else?
Yeah, well, it was described. They were both described as unsinkable. You didn't mention that, did you? Oh, I totally missed that. Okay, well, regardless, interestingly enough, the Titanic wasn't really discussed as unsinkable until after it had sunk.
Really?
Yeah, so people were saying, "Oh, unsinkable ship is now," and so none of the engineers or the builders or the people paying ever considered it unsinkable. Why would you? Of course, it's sinkable. You just poke a hole in the side, and then it's sinkable. Anybody who knew what they were talking about wouldn't call it unsinkable, and then everybody jumped on board. Everybody jumped off board when
it started sinking.
When it sank, because it was a much more compelling story. The unsinkable ship sinks. Of course, that's better. And this is a perfect example of confirmation bias with the Titan. There were so many other differences. The captain and whatnot. Like you name 100 things and 2 of them will be similar, but they're such striking things that they seem so amazing that they could have happened so similar. And when people make, like, say, a psychic prediction and they get a couple things right and people are like, wow, and they ignore all the hundreds of things they got wrong, this is kind of a perfect
perfect analogy.
Yeah, exactly. And we get to see it through, the lens of history, where we get to see everything laid out flat and understand why these things were similar. Of course, these things were similar because they were around the same time. The person writing the book was writing about the time and what would come to be. Yeah. So all these things were obviously, they were writing about the same laws and the same economic pressures of things that were happening at the time. So of course they're going to have some similarities. Similar
technologies, similar courses.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff like that.
So yeah, it's crazy. It's weird, but it's not that weird.
That's a very good point with the confirmation bias. I like that.
But yeah, you've got this week you're going to challenge me to learn as much as I can in 5 minutes about something. And what is that?
That is xylene.
Xylene?
Xylene.
Is that a gas?
I'm not going to tell you anything.
Okay. All right. I thought that was a gas. I think I know something interesting about this, so I hope it's what I think it is. All right. Anyway, so you've got a quiz for us then.
I'm so excited for this quiz. Okay.
All right. Tell me the quiz.
And this is so perfect because you brought up, the guy who attempted to assassinate Jackson with the 2 pistols, and then Jackson just beat him down with his cane.
Yeah.
So these are all like hilarious assassination stories. So they were all successful.
Oh.
But they were just like hilariously blunderous or something like that. Now, the trick is I've thrown in a couple that I just made up. So I'm going to give you a brief death by blank, and you have to tell me whether it happened or whether I just made it up.
Okay, so that's all I got to do. I got to say true or false, basically. Right? Keeping in mind, last week you got perfect. And you've made this easy for me, so I can also get perfect, right?
And this is a good way for me to tell some more cool stories about funny assassinations.
All right, let's get at it.
Death by axe-wielding bear.
What? Axe-wielding bear? I can't... They don't have opposable thumbs. That's got to be made up. You've made up the first one. That's true. That's false. It's true that you've made it up.
That actually happened. So, the story is, there was a Swiss political leader named Georg Janach, who was a huge dick. He was just the worst guy around. And he went to a carnival where everyone was wearing masks and stuff. And he sees a group of strangers in masks walking on by, and they're like, hey, can we hang out with you a bit? He's like, and he looks at them. There's a bunch of guys in masks, and they're carrying weapons. And he's like, sure. So he invites them over. One of these guys was wearing a full bear costume. So as soon as they get to his place, the guy in the bear costume shoots Jorg and then finishes him with an axe.
Now that's not fair.
It was a little misleading.
You led me to believe it was a bear.
But yeah, death by axe-wielding bear costume guy.
All right, that's fair. That's hilarious too. I can't even this sounds so made up, and that's why I thought it was made up.
All right, question 2: death by Mr. Bean level comedic blunders.
Death by Mr. Bean. Okay, that sounds like the Franz Ferdinand assassination. Okay, how about I'm going to say that's true, just because you're being so vague as to not give me anything at all. Okay.
All right, it is true. So this is what happened, right? These 2 British intelligence officers were set up to kill this Nazi leader. So they waited for his car to come around a bend with a machine gun. And as soon as his car came into view, the guy with the machine gun pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. Because earlier, the British intelligence officer had picked a whole bunch of plants for his pet rabbit and put them in the same coat pocket as the disassembled gun. And now all the plants were clogged in the gun that he had now reassembled. So his gun wasn't firing. Naturally, the Nazi guy stopped and he's like, what the hell? And he pulls out his pistol and starts shooting at the assassins. Except his pistol doesn't have any bullets in it.
Oh, was it full of lettuce too?
No,
Or
it just had nothing. Empty gun. So now the second...
So these guys are sitting at each other just playing with toy guns,
they're like
really.
basically just going, pew, pew, pew. So the second British officer, he's like, ah, crap. He pulls out a bomb and lobs it at the car, but he misses. And the bomb goes off and wounds the Nazi and his driver and himself. And so now, instead of like the Nazi and his driver being like, let's get the hell out of here, they both still only armed with their empty pistol. They get out of their car and they chase the second assassin around until he gets on a bike and rides away. Like a pedaling bike. So then the Nazi goes, all right, driver, go get that first assassin guy who's still wrestling with the plant gun. So the driver goes over and he's about to, like, I guess, wrestle this British officer down. British officer goes, oh yeah, I forgot, I have a pistol. And he pulls it out and shoots the guy in the leg. Shoots the driver in the leg. And then he just leaves.
The leg?
He doesn't even finish the Nazi.
Why? What is going on
The
here?
Nazi eventually dies from his injuries because they couldn't find a car that would take the Nazi guy to the hospital. Because they were in a Nazi-occupied land, and everyone was like, no, I hate the Nazis. Why would I take this Nazi to the hospital?
So this was unbelievable, but still successful assassination?
Yeah. Just like hilarious blunders.
Yep, all right.
Question 3. Death by...
How many questions are there, by the way?
Death by multiple accidental paper cuts.
Oh, God, really? Ugh. Oh, I don't know. That sounds contrived. I'm going to say it's false.
I did make it up. I don't even have a cool story behind it. Question 4. Death by incompetent actor.
Death by incompetent actor. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to say yes. Yes, that's true.
It is true. Do you know which incompetent actor I'm referring to?
No.
John Wilkes Booth.
I thought, because theater, whatnot. Yes, I knew he was an actor.
Yes,
but
he was an actor. So,
but he's
for anyone who doesn't know, this is the guy who assassinated Abraham Lincoln at the theater. So the story goes, Lincoln was assassinated in his box. So it's like a second level balcony box thing. So Booth walks up behind Lincoln, shoots him with a one-shot pistol. So now he's only armed with a knife. And the guy who was Lincoln's guest, Major Rathbone, is now like pretty pissed off. And he like turns around and starts trying to wrestle Wilkes Booth down. And so Booth is like wrestling with this angry guy, eventually overpowers him. And then John Wilkes Booth goes, "What's the best way out?" "Clearly, I'll jump off the balcony." So he attempts to jump off the balcony, but the spurs on his boots get caught on like the cloth bunting around the booth, and he like flips down and falls on his face and breaks his leg.
What is the problem? Why are so many assassinations so blunderous?
So he gets up after like everyone in the theater is now staring at him. He strikes a dramatic pose and yells, "Sic semper tyrannis," which means "thus always to tyrants." And then he hobbles away. And he hobbles around for 12 days until he was caught and killed. Like, it's just the most blunderous thing you could think of.
Oh, I don't know. That last one was pretty crazy.
So that was death by incompetent actor. Question 5. Death by drinking competition.
Oh God, that has to have. Well, that is an assassination though, or is this just a death?
No, this is an assassination.
By drinking competition. Okay, you could put something in somebody's drink. I'm going to say that happened.
It did not happen. I made it up.
You made it up. Do you have a cool story at least?
No, but in my mind, it was something like, I challenged him to a drinking contest, and he drank himself to death.
Oh, and then you forced him to, and when in reality you were just putting the drink down a tube that goes down to your I don't know, back or whatever.
Exactly. That's how I would assassinate people.
There you go. That's how you save your story. All right, number 6.
Death by whining baby.
Whining baby. Now, I don't know. I mean, I can imagine a baby being assassinated because of whining. I guess I'm going to say it happened. Yeah, because the last one didn't.
It did not happen. I made it up.
Okay, fine. You're reasonable then. All right.
Last one.
All right.
Death by slow-mo drive-by clubbing.
Slow-mo drive. I think I did that in Grand Theft Auto the other day. Yeah, that's got to have happened at one point or another.
It did happen, and this is the story. So there's a Greek political activist, and the Greek government didn't like what he was saying. So they hired the top-tier government-trained assassins. These 2 assassins grab the best weapon they can find, which is obviously a small wooden club, and they grab one of those 3-wheeled cars that are like somewhere between a scooter and like definitely not a car, but kind of like a car. So they grab one of those and they drive over to this site where the target was giving his like anti-war speech. And they're driving by and they slow down to like a walking pace and they drive up behind him and club him in the back of the head. And he dies. But now they're stuck going like walking pace with a huge legion of this guy's supporters, having just seen them do this. So naturally, all the supporters run up to the slow-moving car and just drag the assassins out and start beating them down. And that's what happened.
Okay.
Slow-mo drive-by clubbing.
That seems to be a trend as well. Man, okay. So if you've learned anything this podcast, it's not continue to assassinate people, but don't assassinate people, because you'll either do hilarious things or things that get you killed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyway, so that's the end of the quiz then? How did I do?
I don't know, you got that one right. I'm
going to say I got 9 out of 9.
No, there was only 7 questions. You got that one right. 3? You got 3 out of 7?
I got at least 5. Come on now. All right. Anyway. So I guess that's the end of the show then. You should email comments and questions to mindthegaphosts@gmail.com. Our next show will be called Way Too Many Vitamins, a pun that is only gotten by writing it out. And you should subscribe to us on YouTube, iTunes, or the podcast feed of your choice. And be sure to like or rate us depending on your platform. It really helps. Thanks for listening.
My hidden blade for a secret attack, jumping off of giant buildings like I was a Superman. Use your mama as a meat shield every time that I can.